have an extra sheet of paper?
Yes, I do.
So I can make notes. I forgot to bring up that paper.
No problem. I'll give you a couple. There you go.
Thank you much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else want a sheet of paper?
Please, I'm sorry, sit down.
Thank you.
I'm assuming this is a exhibits binder?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Your Honor, just so you know, I'm not so good with tech. Every now and then my phone might do one of those things where it updates, just to let you know.
Okay. Can you?
I know in most courses
Can you
they
silence?
turn it off.
Can you silence it?
I've got it all the way down, and that tone still
Oh.
comes on when it doesn't update, so sorry to the competitors. I hope it doesn't distract you.
All right. I think that'll be the least of their worries. That's just a guess, but I think so. All right. We're gonna, was given strict instructions not to begin before 30 minutes, so I will give it another 10 seconds, then we'll get rolling. Congrats to all the competitors and helpers, second chairs. Quite an honor for you guys to be here. All right, so let's begin. And during introductions, if you could, especially the attorneys, first chair, spell your last name so none of us put the scores in the wrong category.
Appearances from the plaintiff.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Laniya Davidson. It's Davidson. I'm joined today by my co-counsel, Mr. Gabriel Rosella.
Morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
We represent the estate of Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Introductions from the defense, Your Honor?
Yes.
My name is Audrey Vanderslice, Vanderslice, and I'm joined today by my co-counsel, Ms. Jessica Alexander.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
And today we represent the defendant in today's case, Dragon Studios.
Okay. Are there any, before we get to opening statements, any preliminary matters from, let's start with plaintiff?
Just a few housekeeping matters, Your Honor.
Sure.
First, we'd like to invoke Rules 603 and 615, which call for the constructive swearing in and sequestration of all witnesses barring party representatives. The plaintiff has no party representative today.
Okay. My understanding is that's pretty mandatory, 603, 615, so no
Yes, Your
objection.
Honor, we agree with that. Our
Okay.
party representative will be in trial today, and that will be Mr. Coldoy.
Okay.
Your Honor, we'd just like to note that Exhibits 1 through 25 have been pre-admitted prior to today's trial.
That's our understanding, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, we'd like to ask your preferences about movement about the well. Should we ask permission before approaching the witness, opposing counsel, the bench, the jury?
It's pretty much freedom for both of you with one exception. If you're approaching the adverse witness, please ask permission. But if you want to give something to your own witness, that's fine.
Yes, Your Honor. And finally, should we presume that all objection arguments are held constructively outside the view of the jury?
Yes.
All right, with that, the plaintiff is ready to go.
Okay?
Just one matter from the defense, Your Honor.
Sure.
We just want to let Your Honor know that the verdict form that's going to be operative in today's trial is verdict form D. The defense today will be denying the negligence claim.
Very well. And I assume that there was the appropriate notice.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, great. All right, so we're ready for opening statements?
Yes, Your Honor. Defense is ready to proceed to
All
opening
right,
statement.
plaintiff opening statement, please.
May I proceed?
Please.
May it please the court. They pushed the limits. He paid with his life. It's June 20th, 2023. Movie star Peter Jones is standing at the top of a mountain. He's about to film the greatest movie stunt ever captured on camera. He rides a motorcycle down the side of a mountain, off a cliff, opens up a parachute, and free falls down to the ground. He lands safely. But the producer isn't satisfied. He wants the shot to be more daring. He wants Mr. Jones to deploy his parachute later, to wait longer. He tells him to do it again. The producer watches Mr. Jones go back up to the top of that mountain. The producer has a walkie-talkie in his hand. His one job to tell him when to deploy his parachute. He looks at the screen, watches Mr. Jones go down that mountain, off the side of the cliff. He watches for his perfect shot. That call is never made. Mr. Jones plummets to his death. They pushed the limits. He paid with his life. That's why Mr. Jones's family is suing the defendant, Dragon Studios, for negligence. We have a burden of proof. We have to prove that it is more likely than not that the Dragons failed to exercise ordinary care. In this case, that they failed to act, causing Mr. Jones's death. Members of the jury, we're going to meet that burden here today because of three simple facts. First, the defendant pushed the limits of their stunt. Second, the defendant pushed past their own limits. And third, their failure to act caused Mr. Jones's death. So let's take those one by one, starting with the first, that they pushed the limits of their stunt. You're going to hear today from Mr. Jones's agent, Eli Goupion. You're going to learn that Mr. Jones signed up for a skydiving stunt that was well within the limits of what was safe. You'll hear from the defendant's own producer that that wasn't enough. That he wanted the shot to be longer. That he wanted Mr. Jones to deploy later. Which brings us to the second fact, that they pushed past their own limits. Because the producer's one job that day was to give the call for Mr. Jones to deploy his parachute. But you're going to learn that as he watched Mr. Jones fall from 2,000 feet in the air, he was silent. That call never came. Brings us to the third fact. That failure to act caused Mr. Jones's death. You're going to learn that after that call was never placed, it will be undisputed that Mr. Jones died because he plummeted to the ground at over 100 miles per hour. I'm to the jury. In a moment, I expect defense counsel to get up there and say that they did nothing wrong. That they were safe, that their plan was safe, that it was adequate. But members of the jury, this is not about whether their plans were safe. A plan is only as safe as the producer who follows through on it. And you're going to learn today that he didn't. That's why at the end of today's trial, we'll ask that you find Dragon Studios liable for negligence. Because they pushed the limits. And he paid with his life. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Defense open?
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Ms. Davidson. Members of the jury. It was his life on the line. So he made the call. When you think of a movie set, you think of a director with a vision and a producer who's there to make it all come to life. Now, for some actors, those people call the shots. But today you're going to learn that this case isn't just about any actor. It's about Peter Jones. You probably heard of him yourself. And unlike other actors, he doesn't use stunt doubles. He doesn't use special effects. No, every stunt, every scene, it's his life on the line. And anyone who's ever worked with him knows that on Mr. Jones's sets, he makes the calls. So let's step on to Mr. Jones' set for a moment. They just finished shooting their last scene. They're ready to wrap up the movie. And the director pulls him to the side and explains that he's going to need to use special effects to make the biggest stunt in Mr. Jones's career a little longer. Mr. Jones makes the call. Mr. Jones tells him, no, we don't need special effects. I'll just hold on for longer. I'll just pull my parachute later. So Mr. Jones, the next day, he sets up his bike. He gets ready to ride off that ramp, and he does it. He goes into free fall for 5 seconds, for 7 seconds, for 9 seconds, and his director is in his ear yelling, pull your parachute, pull. But it's his call to make. 10 seconds. 11 seconds, 12 seconds, it's his life on the line, and he doesn't pull. 13 seconds. Guys. What was Dragon Studios supposed to do in that moment? Because sure, it was their movie. But it was his. It was his choice. It was his plan. It was his life. And it was his call. And when the plaintiff chooses to bring a burden in today's case, takes that on, I can't just tell you these allegations are true. They need to prove them to you. They need to prove it's more likely than not that Dragon Studios, well, their decisions, they didn't exercise ordinary care. They need to prove to you that lack of care is what actually caused the harm in this case. Caused Mr. Jones to die. You see, there are going to be 2 reasons that they won't be able to meet that burden today. And I want to walk through them together, just one by one. So let's start with the first reason. Dragon Studios was careful. Because you see, you're actually going to meet the producer of that company yourselves today. And he's going to take that stand and he's going to tell you everything they did. He's going to tell you they shelled out millions of dollars to make sure that Mr. Jones would be prepared that day. Let him practice it 1,000 times, literally. He's going to explain that they hired the best stunt coordinator in the business, experts, to make sure that the numbers were just right, that this stunt would be as safe as possible so that Mr. Jones could be protected during his dream stunt. And that brings us to the second reason they won't be able to meet their burden today. Because you see, part of their burden is proving that it was the production company that caused his death. But the second fact today is that Mr. Jones was the reason he got that day. Mr. Jones made the calls on set because the evidence today will show that from the beginning, Mr. Jones had the idea for this stunt. Mr. Jones was the one who didn't want to use a safety harness. Mr. Jones was the person who refused to use a stunt double. And we expect members of the jury that no one, not Miss Davidson, not a witness, not Mr. Jones's agent, will be able to deny that fact. I wish I could tell you that at the end of today's trial, you'll know. You'll know why Mr. Jones didn't pull the parachute that day. You'll know exactly what happened in the air that day. We expect the plaintiff won't be able to tell you that. But what you will know is that it wasn't them calling the shots. It wasn't Dragon Studios members of the jury. It was Mr. Jones making the calls. That's why at the end of today's trial, I'm going to come before you again, and I'm going to ask that you find Dragon Studios not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Plaintiff, first witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor, we call Ms. Googie onto the stand.
Before you start, would it be helpful for all of you to move down?
It's okay.
Okay, all right. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Yeah, hi, I'm Eli Gugion.
What do you do for a living?
Oh, I went to law school at UCLA after I graduated, and I wanted to get into entertainment law. Long story short, one bad shrimp scampi made me miss the bar exam, so now I'm a Hollywood agent.
Do you know why you're in court today?
Yeah, one of my clients was Peter Jones, and I was on the set the day that he died.
Can you tell us who Peter Jones was as an actor?
Oh yeah, Peter was the best. I mean, he was a professional stuntman. Loved to do big stunts, anything that he could do to make the movie great, he would always go for.
And I just want to be clear, you said that you were his agent. If the plaintiff wins this lawsuit, will you see any of the money from it?
No, Peter had a wife and 3 kids. All of the money will go to them.
Let's talk about the movie that Mr. Jones was filming. What was he set to shoot in June of 2023?
So Peter was filming all Lost movies. It's like a big spy action franchise. So he had a really big stunt set for June of 2023 for the 7th All Lost movie.
And what was that stunt that Mr. Jones was supposed to do for the movie?
So he was gonna take a motorcycle and ride it like 80 miles an hour down this ramp, and then launch himself into the air, and then parachute down to safety every time.
Ma'am, who was supposed to produce that stunt?
It was Dragon Studios, the same people who produced the other ones. I think the executive producer on that film was Cole Doy.
Well, let's talk about Mr. Doig's approach to filming. Do you know what his role was supposed to be in that stunt?
Yeah, I was in the control room a lot with Mr. Doy, and it was his job to tell Peter when to pull his parachute.
So just to be clear, Ms. Gugion, who was supposed to make the call to Mr. Jones to deploy his parachute?
Mr. Doy.
When did you begin filming for that stunt?
We started filming the actual stunt on June 20th of 2023.
How did that day go?
Went fine. We did the stunt 6 times, and Peter was all good on all 6.
So on June 20th, what was the original plan for the details of when Mr. Jones was supposed to deploy his parachute?
So once Peter went off the ramp, a countdown started. And after 4 seconds of Peter falling, Mr. Doy would tell him to pull his parachute, and Peter would.
And on June 20th, is that what happened? Did Mr. Doig do that?
Yeah, for all 6 of the takes. That's what happened.
Was June 20th the last time that Mr. Jones filmed those stunts?
It was supposed to be, but no.
When did you film the rest of it?
The next day, the 21st.
Do you know why you added that extra day from the 20th to the 21st?
Mr. Doy pulled me and Peter aside at dinner the night of the 20th, and he told us that he wanted this shot to be longer, that it needed to be a little bit longer, so he wanted to redo it and have Peter wait to pull his parachute.
So let's be clear, who proposed for Mr. Jones to wait longer?
It was Mr. Doy's idea.
Then let's talk about the day that you filmed that extra stunt. Would you recognize a video of that stunt or to show it to you?
Yeah.
Under permission to approach with what's been already admitted as evidence as Exhibit 2 to show to the jury and also the witness.
Any objection?
She could have let me speak. That's
Sure,
fine, Your
it's
Honor.
just a video.
Okay.
It's the
Go
best
ahead.
way to put it here for everyone to see.
Wherever you're fine. Do you, if you
Okay.
feel, if the defense feels a need to move, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Right? Were you in the control room that day watching this?
Yeah, I was. So was Mr. Doy.
Can we play until 10 seconds?
The countdown starts here.
All right. So we're at 10 seconds. This is 4 seconds after Mr. Jones has left the ramp. Did Mr. Doig give the call at that point?
No, it's the time that he'd been doing it the day before, but he wanted a longer shot. So.
Let's run it to
Objection, Your Honor, to speculation. May I be heard?
Sure.
Your Honor, at this point, the witness is connecting the decision that was made on June 21st to the specific mindset of the director, specifically that he wanted a longer shot. That's jumping into a mindset, and it's speculation.
response.
Yes.
Your Honor, Ms. Gouillon already testified that the reason that they were running this shot on this day was because Mr. Doig said that he wanted a longer shot. That's why they weren't doing the 4-second deployment. They were going to do a 10-second deployment. This is not speculation. Mr. Doig told her that's the reason why this shot was going that way.
Do you dispute that that's exactly what was the foundation that was laid just before this last question?
No, Your Honor, we understand that's why they were taping it again, but at this point, they're taking it a step further. This witness is now connecting what was happening in this video to the live mindset that the director had on that day, and we don't believe there's any foundation for how she knows what his mindset was on the 21st. We understand they've laid the foundation for the previous conversation on the 20th, but those are two separate instances.
I'm going to sustain the objection because of the court's concern with the word wanted the next day.
Motion to strike, Your Honor.
Yes, granted.
So Ms. Gouillon, at that point, did Mr. Doig give the call?
No, didn't.
Can we play until 15 seconds? All right, ma'am, we were 9 seconds after Mr. Jones has jumped off of the ramp. Did Mr. Doig give the call then?
No, the day before, 9 seconds is when he told me he was going to call, but no, yeah.
What were you doing at this point?
I was screaming. I was telling Doig to call Peter to tell him to pull his parachute.
Can you keep playing? Man, we've just watched the entirety of that video. At any point in time, did Mr. Doig give the call for Mr. Jones to deploy his parachute?
No,
And let's talk about what happened after. Now, did you go down to the crash site where Mr. Jones landed?
yeah. I needed to see Peter myself, so we flew down.
You say we. Who was with you?
Mr. Doig.
When you got down to the crash site, what did you do?
We landed and we walked over to Peter. He'd hit the ground hard.
Did either of you say anything?
Yeah, once I saw Peter, I lost it. I started screaming at Mr. Doy, and I asked him, why did you wait so long? Why didn't you tell him to pull it at 9 seconds?
Did Mr. Dwight say anything?
He said, I wanted a longer shot.
Thank you, ma'am. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Very well. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Ms. Goyan, before I ask you any questions, I just want to say I'm so sorry you lost your client that day.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you just a few questions and we'll get you right out of here. Ms. Goyan, I want to talk about whose idea it was to do this stuff. Because 2 years ago, when you first started making this movie, that production studio didn't call you up, did they?
No.
They didn't say, I have a grand idea for this stunt for your client, did they?
No, they didn't.
They didn't say, how fun would it be to have your client drive a motorcycle off the side of a mountain cliff, did they?
No.
No, it was your client's idea to do all that.
Yeah, Peter came up with the stunt for this movie.
And I want to talk about exactly what Mr. Jones's plan was, because his idea was to set up a mountain bike, right?
Yeah, it was like a Honda motorcycle or something.
To ride it off the side of a cliff in Norway,
Yes.
and to let go of that motorcycle midair. That was all his idea.
Yeah, that was his plan.
Well, then I want to talk about who was calling the shots on set. Because, man, you would agree that Mr. Jones, well, he was a very established actor, right?
Yeah, he'd been filming, like, this is his 7th All Lost movie.
That's right, this was his 7th time around the block.
Yes.
And you know why he was participating in those stunts, right?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Your Honor, it's cross-examination. If the witness doesn't know, she'd be welcome to say so.
I'm going to sustain the objection because it can be speculation based on my interpretation of
Yes,
how
Your
you
Honor.
asked that question.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm happy to rephrase.
Okay.
Man, Mr. Jones told you why he was willing to do those stunts.
Yeah, he said that he loved doing big action stunts.
Because that wasn't his first action stunt, was it?
No.
You know that he had a reputation to maintain as his agent.
Objection, Your Honor, under Rule 404, improper character evidence may be heard.
Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel is trying to elicit testimony that Mr. Jones did stunts in the past that were big and exciting to show that he has a character for doing risky behavior in order to show that in the day in question, he chose to push it further. That's improper character evidence to show action and conformity.
Brief response, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
First of all, Your Honor, it's not actually in contention in today's case that this dangerous stunt was his idea. But mostly, Your Honor, we're not using this to prove action and conformity therewith. We already know that it was his idea. We're using it actually for 404B. We're trying to show that he actually had a motive to be doing this that day. He had a reputation to maintain, as that was the next question I was going to ask, and there was a reason why he felt the need to be doing these stunts in the first place.
Any last response?
Yes, Your Honor, they're using this to show that Mr. Jones has a character trait of doing risky things in order to show that he would have taken it further the day of. That's their entire contention. That's improper character evidence.
Final response, Your Honor.
No. I'm going to kind of split the baby here. I am going to instruct the jury that they are not to consider this for purposes of establishing any sort of character trait, but only for purposes of motive that Mr. Jones may or may not have had.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
And you know as his agent that he had quite an image to maintain, right?
I mean, yeah, Peter loved making his audiences happy. He wanted to make great action movies.
You'd recognize photographs of those stunts that he'd done?
Yeah.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness after approaching opposing counsel with exhibits 26 through 29.
Granted.
courtesy copy for the bench, Your Honor.
Aye, sure.
Permission to approach.
Yes. As long as both counsel don't have a weapon, you don't have to ask permission to approach the bench.
No, Ma'am, I just handed you pictures of his previous stunts from the previous All Lost movies, right?
Yeah.
Now, we'll go through these one by one. They're fair and accurate copies, right, all of them?
Yeah, these are all shots from the movies.
Your Honor, at this time, we move to enter exhibits 26 through 29 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections as long as it's still for the limited purposes of showing motive and not for improper character evidence.
Yes, Your Honor.
That's understood, and the jury is so instructed.
Yes, Your Honor. Ma'am, exhibit 26 here. He's hanging off the side of a mountain, right?
Yep, that's Peter.
Can you tell the members of the jury how high up that mountain was?
Objection, Your Honor, to a lack of foundation.
Response, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Yes, this agent was his agent for all of his movies. That's already on the record. She was present during this filming.
That doesn't necessarily mean that she understands how high it was. So without further foundation, I think it's going to sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. And I'll ask you a different question. You can see in this picture here, there's no ground below Mr. Jones, right?
It's below him, but it's a lot below him for sure.
It's a lot below him. Let's go to the next one. On exhibit 27, can you tell us what building he was hanging off of there?
Yeah, this is the Burj Khalifa. It's the tallest building in the world.
And the next one, what's he hanging off there?
That's Peter on the side of a plane.
And was that plane still, or was that plane moving?
It was definitely taking off.
Oh, it was definitely taking off. What about the next one? Is he above water, or is he underwater?
Definitely underwater.
Was it for just 1 minute?
No, I think he
Objection,
was.
Your Honor, to a lack of foundation.
Your Honor, we
Anyway.
believe this agent, again, would be able to know if he was underwater or above water in the movie that she was
Well, I
in.
think the last question was how long, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, and she was actually there during the filming. It was how long he was underwater for.
I don't remember have you established that she was there?
Yes, Your Honor. If not, I'm happy to re-ask that question just to make sure it's on the
I
record.
missed it, so I'm just going to sustain it.
No problem, Your Honor. Ma'am, you were there for the filming of all these movies, right?
Yeah, I was.
So you were there when this particular one was being filmed?
Yeah.
And how many minutes, to your knowledge, was he underwater?
I think Peter held his breath for 6 minutes for that shot. That one was a lot of training.
So his audience, they'd seen all those movies before.
Yes, I hope so.
And this was the 7th one, right?
Yes.
And you, Mr. Jones, well, you wanted this one to be a bigger movie, right?
I think the studio had just been making bigger and better movies through the entire franchise. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really think that it was necessary for it to keep getting bigger, but
But Mr. Jones, well, you know, he made all the stunts, right?
yeah, he did all of his own stuff.
He came up with the ideas for the stunts.
He came up with the idea for this one, definitely.
Well, for this one, I want to talk about who called the shots about the procedures on set. Because, man, it wasn't the studio's decision not to use a stunt double, was it?
No, I mean, Peter didn't want to use a stunt double.
Right, Peter didn't want to use a stunt double. It wasn't the studio's decision not to use a safety harness, right?
No, I think that was a decision we all came to together.
It wasn't the studio's decision not to have landing pads, right?
Not for the actual stunt. We did a lot of practice jumps with landing pads, but for the actual stunt, there weren't going to be any.
And it wasn't the studio's decision not to use special effects, right?
No, Peter didn't really like CGI or anything like that.
Well, then I want to talk about who made the call for him to do the longer stunt you told us about on direct examination. Because, man, you actually left out part of that conversation on direct, didn't you?
I don't know if I got into the weeds about the conversation now.
Okay, let's get into the weeds. Because, ma'am, you actually had that conversation the night before the stunt with the producer, right?
Yeah, Mr. Doyle pulled us aside at dinner.
Right, and he didn't just tell you he wanted the scene to be longer and he wanted to be in the air for longer, did he?
He did tell us that, yes.
But he also actually told you something else. He told you that there were 2 ways they could make that happen, right?
Yes.
Right. He told you option one, they could duplicate some footage from the one they already had to make that seem longer.
That's not really exactly what he said.
Ma'am, is it your testimony today that he didn't tell you they could duplicate that footage?
No, it's my testimony that that's not all he said. He said that they could duplicate this footage, but if the press asked him about it, did Peter want him to lie to them?
Right, he actually offered, ma'am, that if the media asked about it, he offered to lie so no one would find out.
He didn't offer to lie. He asked Peter if Peter wanted him to lie.
Right, he said, if the media comes to me, do you want me to lie and tell them this didn't happen?
Yeah, that really got to Peter.
Because like you said, Peter had said that he didn't like special effects, right?
Yeah.
He had a reputation with his audience.
Yeah.
So to be clear, you and Mr. Jones, you were given two options. They could duplicate the footage,
Right.
or he could redo the stunt himself.
Yes.
And Mr. Jones chose to redo the stunt.
Yeah, I mean, after that conversation with Doy, Peter said that fine, he'd do 10 seconds.
No further questions.
Okay. Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay.
Ask that Ms. Gouvion be excused.
Now, would we just like to publish exhibits 26 through 29 to the jury with your permission?
That's fine. And don't forget the other copies of the exhibit on the witness chair, please.
Yes, Your Honor. We'll retrieve those before we call our witness.
Any further evidence from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor.
Plaintiff rests?
Yes, the plaintiff rests.
Okay. Defense witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Mr. Coldoy to stand. Yeah, procedure.
Yes.
Good morning.
Morning.
Can you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hi. Cole Doig.
What do you do for a living, sir?
I am a producer. I make movies. Action, comedy, drama, pretty much everything under the sun.
Sir, before we proceed, I want to give you a chance to respond to some of the allegations against you today.
Yeah.
Sir, is it true that you ignored safety protocols on June 21st?
No. I did not ignore safety protocols. Absolutely not.
Is it true that you made the decision to send Peter Jones up into the air for longer?
That wasn't my call.
And I want to talk about that stunt. Let's take a step back. What actually was the stunt he was supposed to be performing?
Yeah, it was pretty wild. So, it's Peter's idea to drive this motorcycle, right? And he takes off the side of a ramp off the cliff, lets go with the bike, and he's in a free fall. And then he pulls the parachute in time and he glides down to safety. That was the idea.
And whose idea was that?
I wish I could take credit for some of the crazy stuff that he came up with, but I can't.
Objection, Your Honor, to an improper character evidence. Have you heard?
Sure.
Your Honor, Mr. Doig just testified. I wish I could take credit for the crazy stuff he came up with. Your Honor, trying to use the past instances of Mr. Jones thinking of crazy things to show that in this instance, he did something relatively crazy. That's improper character evidence.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
We believe this witness is actually referring to the crazy stuff he came up with on this set. In this case, we're more than happy with a limiting instruction to the jury that he's just referencing the crazy things that he came up with on the set the time we're talking about.
Okay, I think the problem, me being able to rule on the objection, is that you're a little too eager on the objection, because I didn't hear the full answer. So, outside the presence of the jury, let's hear the question and answer again, and then I may ask for further argument.
Yes, Your Honor. Whose idea was this?
It was his. I mean, motorcycle off a cliff, parachute jumping. I'm not that creative. That was him.
That's all intending to elicit, Your Honor. We're not mentioning any previous stunts, just the one that he just described to us.
Okay, let's assume I struck the crazy stuff part of the earlier answer. The objection's overruled based on the new answer, apparently.
Yes, Your Honor.
Or I shouldn't say it like that. The limited answer from crazy stuff. Okay,
Yes,
go
Your
ahead.
Honor. Now, Mr. Joig, I want to talk about whether the production company was careful in preparing for that stunt.
Absolutely.
How did the company prepare for that stunt?
It was a marathon. I mean, we built this whole massive, like, practice facility in Canada, had like this pseudo ramp to mimic what the thing would actually look like. And we put Peter through the ringer to make sure he'd be ready.
Objection, Your Honor, to improper character evidence. May be heard.
Yes.
Your Honor, they're trying to use the past instances of Dragon Studios doing things safely to show that in this instance that Mr. Doig would have acted safely. That is action in conformity. Ms. Vanderslice started off with, let's talk about whether Dragon Studios acted safely or was careful. That's improper character evidence.
Response on those,
Yes.
Your Honor? Again, we're talking about the exact instance that we're discussing in court today. You see, it's not just about that one moment where there was a signal or not. It's about how they prepared Mr. Jones for that particular stunt. And it's whether or not they had any contingency plans in case something went wrong. In this case, Your Honor, the reason why they weren't negligent, according to us, of course, is that they were able to prepare for that scene as much as they possibly could. Opposing counsel's objection goes to weight and not admissibility.
Your Honor, may I respond to that?
Yes.
Your Honor, what this is about is that one moment. Whether Mr. Doig made the call on that day to give the signal for his parachute. What they did before to prepare for all the safety precautions, the plans, that's just to show that they were careful before and then to show conformity therewith in the moment. But this is only about that moment.
Final response, Your Honor.
I think you can address just that point, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Simply that we disagree that it comes down to that one moment. Certainly the way that they prepared for that moment was relevant. How careful they were in making sure that that moment would be safe. And that's exactly the foundation we're laying today to show that, again, they were careful. Part of their burden today is to prove that they acted without the ordinary care that a company should. We're showing that they did.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, motion to strike what's come on about
Yes.
their safety precautions.
Granted.
Sir, I'm going to ask you exactly about that moment on the 21st.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about who was making the calls on set for that. Sir, was it your decision to send him up into the air?
No, it wasn't my decision. I had ideas to tweak the stunt here and there, but I'm not the one on the bike. I mean, I'm not the one with the parachute. It's his call.
Well, then let's talk about that day. I want to talk about whether you were careful in making sure that when he did go up again, it would be safe. How did you make sure that the 7th time, things would be safe when he went up in the air?
Well, we used the math. We had all sorts of calculations to track the different trajectories of the bike and just when that parachute would need to be pulled, how far the jump would have to be.
Objection, Your Honor, I'm going to re-raise under improper character evidence. They're trying to use past actions of safety to show that in the moment Mr. Doig would have been safe.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
In this case, we're talking again just about that 7th stunt. In this case, it's in contention how many seconds he was supposed to wait, how safe each second going by would be. Right now, we're not laying the foundation about the previous preparation pursuant to Your Honor's previous ruling. What we're doing is laying the foundation for the fact that that moment, in those seconds, well, this director, the one who was supposed to make the call, he put a lot of preparation into deciding when that call should happen.
Last word?
Yes, Your Honor, it's only relevant if they're trying to show that because it was safe when they did it back then, that it was safe for Mr. Doig in that moment. That's improper character evidence.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir, I'll re-ask my question. On that 7th stunt, how did you make sure it would be safe the amount of time he was in the air?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I just pulled a number out from nowhere. We used the math. We'd done all the calculations, and I picked a number that would be safe. 9 seconds.
And
That was the tweak.
sorry, sir, who did you hire to come up with those numbers?
I mean, we hired the most elite stunt coordinator in all of Hollywood. We made sure we did everything to make sure that those numbers were right and that would be safe.
I want to make something clear. Let's talk about that actual death. Did you, or did you not, make the signal at 9 seconds?
I did. I pulled up the microphone, I clicked the button, it went green, I said deploy. That's exactly what happened.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Please.
Good morning, Mr. Doy.
Hi, good morning.
Let's start off by talking about why Mr. Jones was filming that fatal scene in the first place.
Okay.
Sir, on June 20th, Mr. Jones had agreed to an original plan to film that stunt. Isn't that correct?
That's right.
That original plan had him pulling his parachute after 4 seconds.
Yes, that's true.
You filmed that scene 6 times.
Yes.
Sir, you thought that you didn't get enough footage for that scene. Isn't that true?
Yes, that's right. That's what I brought up with Peter.
So I just want to be clear. You came up with the idea to extend that 4 seconds to 10 seconds. Isn't that true?
Yeah, it was my proposal. I was like, hey, Peter, we can, go one way, go the other way. Do you want to have another take?
So, sir, let's be clear. You came up with the idea to push from that 4 seconds to 10 seconds because you wanted a longer shot.
Yeah. And
So-
I asked Peter, is it going to be okay?
Sir, you came up with that idea to push from 4 seconds to 10 seconds because you thought audiences wouldn't be impressed, right?
Right.
You pushed from that 4 seconds to 10 seconds because you felt a lot of pressure from the audience. True?
Sure.
Well then, let's talk about what happened on June 21st. Sir, you said a moment ago that Peter made the call. Is that true?
Right. I'm not the one on the bike. All I can do is propose it to him, right? Hey, do you want to do another take?
Sir, you were in the control room on June 21st that day, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You say Peter made the call. Who was standing in the control room with the walkie-talkie?
That was me.
Who was supposed to give a call to Mr. Jones to tell him when to deploy the parachute?
That was me. I gave the call.
When you say that Mr. Jones agreed to your plan, he agreed thinking you would give him the call. That's what he agreed to, right?
Right.
Sir, you were here, Miss Gougion testified, correct?
Yes.
She was in the control room with you that day.
Yeah.
Standing right next to you.
Right.
You were here when she testified. You never gave that call.
That's what she said. I gave the call. I don't know whether she didn't hear me, whether she wasn't paying attention. I don't know, but I gave the call just like I'd always done.
So that's a yes, you were here when Miss Gougion said you didn't give that call.
That's what she said.
But sir, you would agree that you think Miss Gougion is a trustworthy person.
Yeah, that's why I just don't get it. It really doesn't make any sense to me.
In fact, you believe she is one of the most honest people in this whole town.
Yeah.
Sir, let's talk about whether or not you're honest. Because you would agree that after the crash, you went down to the crash site.
I did.
You and Miss Gougion were standing there with Peter dead on the ground.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, sir, you made some comments at the crash site, correct?
Yes.
And when you were originally deposed, you tried to hide those comments, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
Well, just be clear, when you were deposed, they asked you what you said at that crash site, and you said, I don't remember. That's what you said originally.
I don't remember. When I saw Peter's body, I don't even remember the words that came out of my mouth.
You're saying you don't remember, but then they said, we can depose the crew. Tell us what you remember, right?
Well, they asked me what the crew was asking, and of course I answered my answers to their questions. I remember what I said then.
So let's be clear, you said a moment ago, you didn't remember, but after they said they would depose the crew, you remembered then, right?
I think it's two different things. I mean, I don't remember what I said when I saw the body, but the answers to the questions I was asked, of course I remember.
Sir, let's make this clear. They didn't ask you what you said when you saw the body. They asked you if you said anything down there. And you stated at first you didn't remember.
Right.
But then you said you did remember.
To the questions I was asked. That's right.
Right, because Miss Gougion, she was down there, and you remember her asking you, how could you wait so long? Right?
That's what she asked.
You remember her asking you, why didn't you give the signal at 9 seconds? She asked you that.
That's what she said.
Sir, when she asked you, why didn't you give the signal at 9 seconds, you didn't say, you're wrong, right?
No, I didn't give it the light of day.
When she asked you, why didn't you give the signal at 9 seconds, you didn't say, I gave the signal.
No, I didn't feel the need.
You say you didn't feel the need, but when she asked you, how could you do this, what you responded with was, I wanted a longer shot.
That's right. That's exactly what I told Peter.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Hello again, Mr. Doig.
Hi.
Mr. Doig, how many people could deploy Mr. Jones's parachute?
Just Peter.
How many people could make the call to stay in the air for longer instead of pulling the parachute?
Just Peter.
Ms. Davidson just asked you a lot of questions about the moment after you saw him dead at the bottom of the mountain. Sir, who was Peter Jones to you?
Peter was everything to me. Those movies, they made our studio. And without Peter, we wouldn't have those movies. I considered him one of my closest friends.
What was the state of mind you were in after you saw one of your closest friends dead on the ground?
I mean, I froze. It was a blur.
Thank you for your time. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Barring any recross, Your Honor, permission for Mr. Doig to take a step down.
Yes. You may step down, sir.
With that, Your Honor, the defense rests for case in chief.
Plaintiff ready for closing?
Just a
Statement?
moment to get some of the text set up.
Sure.
Your Honor, in that time, just permission for us to retrieve one copy from the jury for our own closing arguments afterwards.
Sure. Is the jury finished with all of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get all of them.
Yes, Your Honor.
I mean, if you want to look at them during close or anything.
We also have two sets.
We can read
Two
one of
sets.
them and I'll just
Okay,
say them.
fine.
And can I get a time check for closing?
Yeah, 8 minutes and 1 second.
Thank you. May I proceed?
Go ahead.
May it please the court. Members of the jury, this is the moment. This is the moment right here where Mr. Doig is supposed to give the signal for Mr. Jones to deploy his parachute. This is the moment that makes or breaks whether or not Mr. Jones survives. That call, Mr. Doig's call, is never made. Peter Jones, waiting for a signal that never came. He tries to deploy his parachute. It is far too late. He hits the ground. And he dies. Because they pushed the limits. He paid with his life. That's why we're here today, members of the jury. That moment. That's why we're suing Dragon Studios for negligence. I don't want to make that clear. We took on a burden when we did that. We had to prove that it was more likely than not that Mr. Jones's death was caused by their failure to act. And that's exactly what we proved today. Because of 3 simple facts. They pushed the limits of the stunt. They pushed past their limits. And that their failure to act caused Mr. Jones's death. So let's start with that first one, that they pushed the limits of the stunt. Now, all throughout today, the defense has been trying to claim that it was Mr. Jones who wanted to do all of these things. Mr. Jones' idea for all of these stunts. But you heard today from their own producer who came up with the idea to push the limits of the stunt that they had performed 6 times. Mr. Doig. Mr. Doig's idea to push those limits from 4 to 10 seconds, and you heard why. He pushed from 4 to 10 because he felt that that shot was too short. He pushed from 4 to 10 because he felt audiences would be impressed. He pushed from 4 to 10 because he wanted that longer shot. So they set up another run. They're going to deploy at 10 seconds now. Which brings us to the second fact. They pushed past those limits because you heard when the time came down to it. When they're watching the screen, when 10 seconds has hit, Mr. Doig says nothing. Members of the jury, that's the moment that this really comes down to. What they had done in the past, the safety plans, all of that, that does not matter. That is out the window. It is this moment in time that matters. So we need to weigh the stories here that you've been told. Because on the one hand, the defense says Mr. Doig said it. He said deploy, Peter didn't deploy. On the other hand, you have Ms. Gugion who says, I was in that room. I was there. He didn't say anything. I was yelling at him. All he was doing was watching the screen. He didn't do anything. So the defense wants you to believe this is going to come down to a he said, she said. But that's not what this is. You get to weigh the totality of the circumstances. Mr. Doig took the stand and told you Ms. Gugion is one of the most trustworthy, most honest people he knows. Mr. Doig, on the other hand, when he's being deposed about what he says and does at this crash site, he tries to hide what he says. He says, I don't remember. Then he says, oh, I do remember. I couldn't say anything. Oh, but I said this. So you get to weigh the credibility of both of those witnesses. You also get to weigh the circumstances. Why would Ms. Gugion have the need to lie about what happened in that room? It's not that she just forgot whether or not Mr. Doig said it. She is telling you today, she was yelling at him to say it. Deploy, deploy, that's what she was saying. Why would she make that up? You heard today she doesn't get anything from this. Mr. Doig, on the other hand, it's his production studio. It was him in the control room, him with the walkie-talkie. He has everything to lose from this. And then finally, you just get to weigh whether or not the story he says makes any sense, because then they go down to the crash site. Ms. Gugion is standing right next to him. Why didn't you give the signal at 9 seconds? And Mr. Doig, he has to admit, he doesn't say anything to that. I mean, imagine you're being accused of not doing the one thing that would save someone's life, and he doesn't say, you're wrong. He doesn't deny it. No, what he says is, I wanted a longer shot. Because that's what he's been saying the whole time. That's why they pushed the limits. That's why he pushed past those limits. He wanted a longer shot. Which brings us to the third fact. It was that failure to act that caused Mr. Jones's death. Members of the jury, it is not disputed how Mr. Jones died. It is not disputed that he was in the air, falling faster and faster and faster. It is not disputed that he hit the ground and died. That is not in dispute. What is in dispute is whether or not Mr. Doig made that call. And the evidence you've been presented today shows that he did. Members of the jury, as much as the defense is going to come up here and just tell you this was a tragic accident, that Peter pushed the limits. It was this production studio. It was this defendant who was supposed to keep him safe. It was this defendant who had Mr. Jones's life in his hands in a walkie-talkie, who was supposed to make a call that didn't happen. That's why we ask that you find Dragon Studios liable for negligence. Because they pushed the limits and he paid with his life. Thank you.
Defense.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, Miss Davidson, members of the jury. It was his life on the line. He made the call. Back in 2023, Mr. Jones was at his peak. He was a household name. Most of you probably know him. He wasn't just a part of a multi-billion-dollar movie franchise. He was the multi-billion-dollar movie franchise. Every movie was better than the last. Every stunt was bolder than the first. But the problem, members of the jury, is that when you're going on your 7th movie, what is better than hanging off the side of a mountain? What is bolder than hanging off a moving airplane? What is more impressive than staying underwater for 6 whole minutes? Well, you and I might not have the vision to answer that question, but Mr. Jones did. Mr. Jones makes a plan. He makes a plan to get on a bike and ride that motorcycle off the side of a mountain and go into free fall. That was his plan. Today you learned that plan ended up done during that stunt. Now, members of the jury, when you first heard about this case, you probably thought this was, well, it's a little unexpected. These stunts are dangerous. But what you have to understand is why he was up there in the first place. Because you see, Mr. Jones, he had an audience to impress. He had a reputation to maintain. Now, the thing is, members of the jury, is that we don't bear the burden in today's case. The burden rests on the plaintiff. They chose to take on a burden. They chose to tell you that Dragon Studios is liable. And so let's walk through what that means. It means they have to prove that they were actually careless, and that carelessness, that lack of ordinary care, is what caused Mr. Jones's death. are two reasons they couldn't meet that burden. The first is that Dragon Studios was careful. You see, they try day in and day out to paint this picture of Dragon Studios as some profit-hungry monster. But is that what the evidence really showed you today, or is that just what they wanted you to believe? Because what the evidence showed today is that they hired the best stunt coordinator in the industry. They had that stunt coordinator, the expert, do the math, run the numbers, all to make sure that Mr. Jones would be safe that day. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because if they're so money hungry, if they are so profit driven, why would they be so careless as to kill off their best asset? They certainly haven't made more money since Mr. Jones died, is it? And if Mr. Doig was really just this producer who cares just about the box office, don't you think he'd at least want there to be a movie for everybody to buy tickets to? I mean, think of the precedent that was set. With all these other movies, the pressure on Mr. Jones to impress everybody. Members of the jury, there was a second reason. A second reason they won't be able to meet that. They didn't meet that burden. And it's that Mr. Jones made the calls. Now, Ms. Davidson came up here. She tried to make it sound like all of this just comes down to one moment. Whether or not that signal actually happened. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The thing is, members of the jury, it doesn't come down to just that one moment. It comes down to the decision after decision after decision that made Mr. Jones in that situation to begin with. No stunt double, no special effects, no harness, no landing pads to help him land. It wasn't the production company that made those calls. And no one in this courtroom today is going to be able to deny that Mr. Jones's death was tragic. Our generation lost one of our best talents. I grew up watching his movie. But the thing is, members of the jury, the thing is, when the plaintiff comes up here and they take a tragedy and they start pointing fingers, they have to be able to prove it. They have to be able to meet their burden, show that it's more likely than not that, well, it was the production studio's fault. And if they didn't make any of those decisions, members of the jury, the decisions that made that stunt so dangerous in the first place, then how could they be right? Now the judge is going to explain that, listen, I'm not here, and you're not here to blame Mr. Jones. We're not here to judge Mr. Jones or even say that it's his fault. We're not taking on a burden. All we're here to do is tell you that it wasn't the production studio that was calling the shots. It wasn't the production studio that was making the calls. So let's go back to that control room. Because they said, it's a he said, she said, and they went out because of what happened after that stunt. They chose his silence, the producer's silence in the minutes after he saw his closest friend dead and disfigured at the bottom of a mountain, and said that's the reason, well, he's got to be lying. When we've told you why, that's not the case. We've told you that actually, even according to their logic, that production company had every reason to keep Mr. Jones safe. That's where their revenue was coming from, members of the jury. That was their closest friend. Mr. Jury, I get it. When you watch Mr. Jones's movies, he seems invincible. But when the camera turns off and the crew goes home, Mr. Jones is just a person. And the thing about people, members of the jury, is that sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes, even with their life on the line, they don't make the right call. But when you're in that deliberation, I trust you'll make the right one. We'll find Dragon Studios not liable. Thank you.
Rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. Members of the jury, Ms. Vanderslice just said something very interesting that this case boils down to. Even with their lives on the line, people make mistakes. That's what this was. Mr. Doig's mistake. When he thought he could get a longer shot with Peter Jones's life on the line, he waited. Too long. That's what this boils down to. When he didn't make that call. Find them liable. Thank you.
Excellent job. Give us a couple of minutes to do our scoring.